Welcome to Stonethorn Manor, a towering old house guarded by an ancient magical hawthorn. Please join me in part 1 where we make the base, the paper structure and the tree in lovely autumn colors. We start by making the base, this time from pink granite. I make an assembly, and once I'm happy with the shape, I mix some plaster Paris with museum grade PVA. This mix combines the hardness of plaster with the toughness of glue to make a very strong and long-lasting material. Once the plaster has set, I sketch it from one side and start to design the house. This is going to be a manor house with late Gothic and Tudor detailing. It's also loosely inspired by a 1923 water tower from Thorpeness in Suffolk called House in the Clouds. The Gothic influence is the overall shape with the height and cascading roofs, whereas the Tudor elements will be in the detailing and the towering chimneys. The main part of the house is a rectangular tower built into the crag. All the other elements are then added to this. The first annex is an L-shaped volume that wraps around the corner of the tower with a steep cross-hipped roof and a jettied upper story. This is loosely modelled on parts of the hall on Stokesay Castle, namely the jettied timber-framed upper story on the hall that overhangs the dry moat. Even though I'm a trained architect, I almost exclusively design and build these models on intuition instead of following a blueprint. Therefore, I only have a vague idea where this is going, and each build is a meandering journey where the result is as hidden to me as it is to you. With the lowest structure in place, I decided to break up the height of the tallest wall with an oriel window. First I make it 2 meters deep, but then I decide to reduce it so that it feels more toned down. Next, I make the first of the jettied upper stories on the tower. Once it is done, I make the second large annex. This is a volume that is almost as large as the tower itself, but with a large cutaway section covered by a steep monopitched roof. Now you can start to see the house taking form, but there's a lot more left to do. I've decided to forego buttresses altogether on this build, but I still want the wide footprint that makes medieval structures feel so grounded, so I flare the bases on all of the parts. Together with the narrow waist and jettied upper floors, this will give the building a lovely hourglass form and strengthen the Gothic feel. By now, the only thing left to do is to make the top floor. This one is also jetted and it will have a steep pitched roof with big overhangs and sprocketed roof or flared eaves, so typical for medieval architecture. Before I can fit the roof, I have to make the chimneys. These are just placeholders, but I make them to get an idea of the size and placement. Once I'm done with the whole house, I very quickly realized that it's too big and top heavy. So I remove both top floors, reduce the height and make a smaller single jetted upper floor instead. Then I also decide to trim away a bit of the side annex. This is to make a cascading double roof, as it is too big in its original form when I've reduced the top floors. I like the shape of this design much better. It is more interesting to look at and it appears smaller and more delicate. This house will be surrounded by a rather large hawthorn tree, and I have a mental image of the tree sticking up almost over the roof, where only the Tudor chimney stacks poke above it. The idea is that the tree is some form of magical guardian, and so I want the house to be almost dwarfed by it. That is why I want it to appear small and delicate, even though it's a manor house. If you're enjoying this so far, please like and subscribe as well. It helps me a lot. Okay, on with the build. Once the house is completed for the second time, I can now start to work on the hawthorn tree. This will also be made with an armature of reclaimed copper wire, like I make almost all of my trees. On this one, I make two main branches that have very different length. One will form the big ones that will encompass the house, and the shorter one will be close to the main trunk to form a volume of foliage there. I shape the tree like a well-pruned bonsai, which are like living sculptures. In fact, I try to sculpt all my trees like little bonsais because I find that most normal trees are rather boring to look at. Only very old ones or trees that grow in precarious spots are actually interesting. These little models are architectural sculptures, and so I want the tree to reflect that in their shape. They are not necessarily meant to be hyper-realistic, though I strive for that too. Their main purpose is to accentuate the building and add beauty and life to the overall composition. As I work on the armature, I realize that I need to add both more branches and more roots to the tree, and I end up adding quite a bit of extra on it. When I'm happy with the number of limbs, I start shaping it. This is the fun part because now I get to make it look old and real while at the same time complementing the house. Then I attach it to the landscape so that I can finalize the shape and start to cover it in plaster of Paris mixed with museum quality PVA. But first I have to make the windows for the house. I dismantle the model, cut out the openings and glue the windows in place. These are made from very fine brass mesh treated with blackening agent and cast in clear epoxy resin. Together they make for really nice properly scaled leaded windows with actual metal. I have a short video tutorial on my channel that describes the entire process if anyone is interested in watching that. As I reassemble the model, I also remake the pitched roofs on the top of the building, and this time I make them with proper ridge sag. This will make the tiles a little more difficult to lay down, but the result will very much be worth it. With this done, I apply a layer of PVA to the copper tree to protect it from corrosion. As it dries, I make the actual chimneys. They're made from 3 layers of paper and will form the base I lay the tiles and masonry on. Now I start to prepare the lichen that will form the fine outer branches and the scaffold for the foliage. I only use the tips of a type of locally harvested reindeer lichen, and these I soak in a mix of paint and glue. This will add much needed strength and color because they are hollow and very brittle and fragile when they are dry. While they soak, I start to cover the tree in a mix of plaster and glue. This is the same cement as on the base, but in a different mix. I need it to be tougher and less brittle, so I increase the amount of glue quite considerably. This is the first model that I used plaster of Paris on, as I've previously used fine wall filler, but I'm not entirely sure about the longevity of that compared to plaster, which had been found in ancient Egyptian tombs. The mixture I am making of glue and plaster is actually called gesso and has been known for centuries. Before it sets completely, I apply a coat of undiluted glue and sprinkle the tree with very fine pre-painted sawdust. This gives a lovely bark texture. While it sets, I start to apply the reindeer lichen. They are hollow, so I thread the little sprigs onto the exposed copper tips on each branch of the tree. Then I add a few extra here and there to thicken the canopy where it's needed. The tree is almost done and I can leave it to fully dry and harden while I start on the foliage. I have experimented before with a few different materials, but I've settled on fine pre-painted sawdust. This is made with diluted paint that is mixed very well to cover the wood properly. Then I dry it in a microwave in 10-second intervals. Mixing, cooling, stirring and separating it until it is dry enough to be sifted through a 40 holes per inch wire mesh. This is the same brass mesh I use for the windows, and anything that doesn't pass through it gets discarded. The reason for this is quite simple. If it's too big, you recognize it as sawdust and it instantly ruins the illusion of foliage. Now I remove the tree from the model and I make a dipping wash for it. This creates a lovely complex layered patina for the trunk and branches. Then I attach the tree to a temporary rock so I can safely handle it when I apply the foliage. Since it's autumn, I've made 3 different hues of foliage and I apply them in layers, starting with a base of yellow followed by orange and highlights of red. This concludes the first chapter in the making of Stonethorn Manor. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. The second episode will be out in 3 weeks' time. Anyway, thank you for staying on to the end.